everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin, and today we're here to do my June wrap-up. So this is going to start with the characters and their little journey. Last time they had kind of awakened to discover they had no bodies, so we're moving on from there. And I'll put a timestamp down below so you know when to skip to get to my quick review of the books that I actually read. My cat's going to join us today.
The two souls still asleep finally began to rise, although Minerva wasn't much more than a shimmer in the air at this point. They looked around and realized they didn't know each other. They didn't even know if they could trust each other. But they definitely had the same problem. No bodies. Rue, who had woken up in a small pond covered in lily pads, couldn't get all the water off her soul. And Sabriel, who by this point had most of her body and life figured out, knew that Bartimaeus was her twin. She decided it was time to figure out exactly what had happened. They roamed the garden, which seemed to be more extravagant than anything they could remember from their former lives. Coswelt could tell them facts about most of the plants they encountered, but not where he had learned these facts. A Great Dane ran by at one point and paused to look at them closely before bounding off again. Bartimaeus suggested that they follow the dog, so they headed to the west, following the path through a variety of floral collections, hoping to discover a way to come back to the living.
I read 12 books this month, which is a really good reading month for me. I'm hoping to keep that up through July and maybe August, but depending on when school starts, my numbers are going to start to drop. So I'm going to go with the lowest rated book up to the highest. The first two books that I have just did not click with me. So the first one is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. This book I think I gave 2 stars. There were a few things that I tabbed in there, but honestly, aside from literally those like 3 tabs, it was a lot of like buzzwordy metaphor. This could have been a good book if it had focused on examples more, because those I did enjoy, but they were just too few and far between for me. Another book that did not click with me at all was The Confession by John Grisham. My dad loves this author, so I thought I'd give it a try, and we both know we have very different tastes in books, and this book was a testament to that. The pacing was so slow. It was like one of those books that happens like over a 4-day time period, which just isn't something that usually works for me regardless of the genre. And I found that in this case, it really did not work. I think the premise was not one that I felt like was done that well. Every character seemed to be either very good or very bad. There was no gray in there. I didn't like the way things were portrayed, or really just the book. Sorry, Dad. Moving on, these books were okay. Not anything amazing, but not bad. Just middle of the road books. And the first one is Love and Misadventure by Lang Leave. So this is a poetry collection. There were a lot of them that I think were just a little bit too over the top cheesy you know? Some of them I just didn't get. They were a little bit too far out there for me, and I feel like if you didn't already know the poems that you wanted to find that were good, you would not enjoy this. It didn't seem like a good representation of some of the great works that I found from her, but I think it is worth it to find the gems in here if you are someone who likes poetry. If you are someone who does not like poetry, this probably isn't for you. I also have a nonfiction kids book that I read, and that was Vlad the Impaler, and this is by Enid A. Goldberg. So this is just a recount of kind of his life. It's made for kids. It has some pictures in there, and it was good. I rarely give nonfiction a super high rating in general. It's a kid's biography, so I didn't expect it to be one of my top reads, but I think it did overall a good job recounting this, and I think kids would enjoy it. The only thing I would say that would deter the audience that it's going for is just the amount of hard to read words, but that's mostly in like the names and places, and that's kind of unavoidable. So I also read Finishing Touches by Hester Brown. I left this one back at my parents' house, just kind of switching some things out. This is a romance that follows a girl who goes back to save a boarding school that was run by her adoptive mother, and it was just a little bit too slow burning for the romance part and just the plot in general. I also think the finishing school bit just did not click with me. However, I really liked the characters, and especially the male characters. There's a cute geeky one, and then like the popular like ladies man, which I just kind of love the dynamic when both of those are in romance. I think overall it was a good read. I did really struggle with the character growth for the main character, Betsy. She's adopted, and part of her journey is trying to figure out who her real mother is, because she thinks it was one of the girls that was at the boarding school the time when her mom was running it. And that, I feel like that could have been a really good way to show her journey, but they really honed in on the fact that because she was adopted, she didn't know who she was. It played too much into like how she felt about herself, and not in a I have no deep roots or family connections, but in a like, I don't know what my personality is because I don't know what my mother's personality was. And it just didn't make sense. She ended up, you know, kind of growing past that, but it was just kind of weird every time it came up. I also read The Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare, and thank goodness I had the No Fear Shakespeare version. So it has like the actual Shakespeare prose on one side and then like Shakespeare for Dummies on the other, which I desperately needed. I've never actually read the story, but I've seen a lot of like adaptations. Shout out to Amanda Bynes. And what is her movie? She's the Man. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I also listened to White Fragility on audiobook. I started a book club with some of my family and friends with the goal of just continuing our racial education, and we're going to be reading a book each month-ish. We started in the middle of a month, so it's kind of off, but our goal is to just keep this movement and our education going. So we're going to be going back and forth with fiction and nonfiction, with supporting Black authors and reading different historical accounts and different things like that. Most of the book recommendations I've collected off of lists that have been up around BookTube. So my goal is to just keep working through that and keeping that discussion going with my family and friends. So this book, White Fragility, by Robin DiAngelo, I enjoyed. It was definitely very eye-opening. I think it was a good book to start on because it asked for a lot of reflection. I would recommend this book. I think it can be brutal and in your face, but necessary. So, read it. Getting up into my higher rated books this month, I have Scythe by Neal Shusterman, one of those two. I loved this book. I think this book was like right up my alley. It was a quick read. As far as books go, I love the premise of, you know, us having conquered death, and the only way that people die is by assassin. So the two main characters in this book are apprentices to become scythes. There were a few things that held me back. I didn't like one of the main characters' kind of character arc. I felt like it was not very believable. I can also say the same thing about one of the mentors in this book. Just kind of his actions didn't line up with how he was portrayed at the very beginning. But honestly, for me, it didn't really deter me that much. But at the end, it did keep me from giving this a 5-star. Another one that I read this month was The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. So this one is very dreamlike, I would say. It follows a 7-year-old boy and kind of him discovering a different world that connects to his, and then as an adult, kind of him looking back on that. This is a good one for Neil Gaiman, but I think if you haven't read his stuff, this may be a hard one to start on because it is kind of a little bit more artsy out there. So this may not be the best one of his to start on, but I still definitely recommend reading this book. With my friend group, we were reading Troy by Adele Guerres, and I finished that. It was a really good book, a great recount of Troy, which I just always love reading retellings of mythology, and I like the way that the gods are portrayed in this. You follow a few different minor characters, so you get to see Troy's downfall through their eyes. And the way that they see the gods and interact with the gods was really interesting. So I enjoyed this. It was a reread for me. I read it way back in high school, so it would have been a long time. And I mean, I know the story of Troy, so I knew where I was going, but still a great read. I also finished this chunk, The Eye of the World. I'm in a reading group with Witchkin Reads for this. We are going to start the second one in July, but I made my way through this one. I really liked it. I am so excited to get farther into the series. I'm still a little intimidated by the fact that it's 14 books long, 13, 14 books long. Yeah, 14 books long. I'm hoping I can keep going with the book a month pace, but I do not usually read my series straight through. I like some breaks between the books, and with this group, there's like a week break, which is not my usual pace at all. So I am hopeful. I love having a group to talk about this with. They're such a great group. So if you're even considering reading this, I highly recommend joining this group because they're just like so thoughtful and articulate, and the book discussions are great, but just general discussions are great. I also tabbed this. Let's see, purple is for lore, blue is for character introductions, pink is for species introductions. I have green for words or things I don't know or don't understand. Orange is when you learn a fact about a character that seems like it could be important, and yellow is just fun moments that I may want to go back and reread. So yeah, I can't wait to keep going. I'm definitely gonna have to buy some more tabs for this one. And then my favorite book that I read this month, I don't have because I immediately lent it out to one of my friends, but that is The Prince and His Dressmaker. And I cannot speak highly enough about this book. Everybody who had seen it on my list said they loved it, and so I knew I was going to enjoy it, but I just did not know how much it was going to like bring me joy. It is an amazing story, but for me, the real thing was the artwork. It was gorgeous. Like, it made me melt. So I would 110% recommend this book. If you have not read it, please do, because the story is gorgeous, the art is gorgeous, and it will just make you feel wonderful. So especially if you need an uplifting quick read, this is the one to go for. So those were my books this month. Let's see if I can get this stack up here, because we all know that showing your book stack is like what everyone's here for, right? Okay, here we go. These are the books I read in June. So let me know what your favorite book from June was, and thank you so much for coming to hang out. I appreciate everybody who comes to watch. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.